Senator Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Scalia, good morning. Thank you for being here.
Good morning.
I do want to start off by echoing my support for the department's recent efforts on joint employer and overtime. I know that's been mentioned a few times. Johnny spent some time on it as well, so I am appreciative of the current direction. As a former employer, I think it's incredibly responsible actions on the part of the department. I want to start the conversation off with a topic that I think is really important for our workforce, and frankly, it's going to be a topic of discussion for however long you are the Secretary of Labor, and I hope that that begins sooner than later. Experts say that about $2 trillion of current payroll could be automated. The minimum wage increase only, in my opinion, accelerates automation of the payroll. If we see a greater acceleration towards automation, what we see are the first rung in the ladder of economic success and mobility being pulled away. The response to that is that low-skill folks have fewer opportunities to get engaged in the workforce, which the consequence of that is longer terms of unemployment and a debilitating impact on communities of color and in rural America as well. What are your comments on the notion that there is a relationship or a correlation between a higher minimum wage and lower opportunities to enter the workforce?
Senator, it's an important potential trade-off that one has to keep in mind as one thinks about what the proper wage for a national minimum wage or for a local wage might be. Different legislative bodies in different locales have reached different conclusions about where to set a wage. There's one federal minimum. But as Senator Scott, as you're pointing out, every time you set the wage, I think people on all sides recognize that if a wage that's mandated is too high, there will be adverse impacts that actually hurt some of the workers that are meant to be helped. I think that needs to be considered. But on the other hand, obviously, the workers' interests more broadly need to be considered too. And we have a longstanding federal policy of having a federal minimum wage. And it's the Labor Department's obligation to enforce that.
I would note that in New York City, when they increased the minimum wage to $15 an hour, that from January 2018 to January 2019, there was a loss of about 6,500 jobs in restaurants, which was the largest reduction since the 2001 recession. So the impact, I think, can be measured in the loss of jobs. And as a kid who grew up in some of the impoverished areas of South Carolina, my first job was, the minimum wage was $3.35. At that time, you could pay folks $2.85 or 50 cents less than the minimum wage in order to encourage more employment opportunities for kids. I'm not advocating that position, but I do think it's really important for us to recognize the powerful impact that minimum wage increases will have on those folks looking for employment, and frankly, fewer than 3% of the current workforce makes the minimum wage. On apprenticeship programs, which I think are incredibly important, I think Germany is a great model for apprenticeships. I'm looking forward to the day that America is the model for apprenticeships around the world. In South Carolina, we have tackled the challenge of apprenticeships in a very powerful way. A big shout out to Apprenticeship Carolina, who has truly taken the responsibility seriously, and we've changed the trajectory of apprenticeships in our state by an incredible number. We are now 50% over our 2020 goals. I have legislation co-sponsored by some of my friends on the other side that provides tax credits to encourage more utilization of apprenticeship programs by reducing the actual cost of the programs. Any quick thoughts with my 30 seconds left?
Sure. You mentioned German apprenticeship programs when we met, and it's something I am interested in learning more about if I'm confirmed. And with respect to South Carolina programs, I had dinner recently with a friend who's been very interested in apprenticeship programs. And by the way, she has no South Carolina ties. but she called out South Carolina as a state that really stands out.
She's very, very educated. This is awesome.
A bright and perceptive person.
Yes, sir. Just in my few last seconds here, Mr. Chairman, if you would allow, two things. Number one, the gig economy is something that we should have a longer conversation about, perhaps a hearing on the gig economy and what the impact that will be on employment and the necessity of having portability and the benefit structure of that economy. I will tell you that the only way to truly understand and appreciate the success and the progress that we've made in South Carolina as it relates to apprenticeship programs is to perhaps come visit South Carolina. And I would invite you to spend some time throughout the state, Charleston being the #1 tourist destination that the nation has today, perhaps the third time in the last 3 years, maybe 4 times in the last 4 years. But because my time is running out, Mr. Chairman.
It's run out.
I am unable to remain for my second round of questions, but would like to yield my time to you if necessary.
Thank you, Senator.
And
Scott.
if I could say, I promise to visit South Carolina tomorrow for back to school day at my daughter's college.
Very good, sir.